Don't give up faith. Don't give up the hope. The American dream is waiting for you. Now.
She's my sister.
She has to be deported.
Magda! Obiecuję ci!
I have a feeling about her. She could be special.
Can you help me, please? I leave my sister here.
I'm here to help you.
I can get her off the island. It'll be difficult and costly, but it can be done. This is Ava.
But it take a lot of money to get them out of there. Or a lot of fucking.
What do you want here in America?
I want to be happy.
Now, Lady Liberty opens her arms to you. How much more she comes out depends on you.
I know you judge me.
I don't judge anybody.
You do not take her.
Let me guess. You're falling for her.
It's an impossible question to answer because it's like, how do you know why you marry your wife? Or, you know, it's like certain things in the story appeal to you. What I find most interesting, at least the way I try to come at it, is from two places: the mood, if I can understand the mood of it, and the character, what the character is going through. And if the character, or if I can express something through the characters, which is very personal to me, in that sense, it's very much an egotistical enterprise, because you're trying to reveal something about yourself. Now, it's not totally egotistical if what you're trying to reveal is not altogether beautiful or pleasant. And for this, I wanted to try to make a film which was, well, I just said a lot of ego is involved, but once you make the film, I think it's important for the filmmaker to forget the ego and to try and make something totally empathetic. Autobiographical, which is not the same thing as personal. Autobiographical means it adheres to the facts of your life. And personal means it's exploring something that is inside of you, your essence, your being, your behavior, your attitudes. So yes, this movie has autobiographical elements from my family, my grandparents namely, but really the core of it, that idea of self-hatred, trying to combat the dislike of yourself, is very much me. If you look at something, a perfect example would be Raging Bull. That Martin Scorsese is not a boxer in 1941, and never was, as far as I can tell. At least if you met him, you would know that's not likely. But you feel him in the film. And the film becomes about self-destruction. Well, on my mother's side, they were Polish, and on my father's side, Russian, or maybe Ukraine. The map was not quite clear at the time. And my grandparents used to tell me stories all the time about what it was like to come through Ellis Island. They came in 1923. And I was saying this earlier to Darius, it was the opposite of the kind of classic American dream movie, which was,
America is so great, I love it, it's fantastic.
It was the bitter and the sweet. They were, I guess, glad they were in the United States, but terribly sorry to miss the old country. And it's very powerful to embrace a dramatic idea which has both elements, both the sugar and the salt. My grandfather used to tell me stories about the old country, and he would be close to tears about how great it was back there, which I never understood, because I kept thinking to myself, even as a kid, they want to chop your head off back there.
Because your grandparents were Jewish.
Yeah. I also didn't like him. I didn't like my grandparents. You know, they didn't speak English, and they were old world, and they smelled funny and boiled meat, and my grandmother was a terrible cook, you know. And I remember you would go into their apartment and lots of wallpaper, and the music would be playing on this old record player. I mean, depressing. It was miserable. My father and mother,
Go talk to your grandparents. Go talk to them. Kiss them. Say hello. Make them feel appreciated.
I didn't care. I was 10 years old. I wanted to go watch Batman or whatever. Now, of course, I regret it completely because it was obvious they had very interesting stories to tell. I only half listened to them. What I do remember, I wound up putting in the film, and my father sort of made up for the rest. You know, he kind of filled me in. And as much as I could remember wound up in the movie. You know, like, I remember them not understanding how to eat a banana, or thinking, you know, telling me that they were served spaghetti with tomato sauce at Ellis Island, and they thought it was bloody worms. So this all wound up in the movie. Well, Joaquin is Jewish in the film. She's not. Because, first of all, it came really first from the history, just learning the history, which was that the Polish immigration at that time was almost exclusively Catholic by that time. But then, of course, it became connected to the theme of the film, which was this idea of sin and redemption, and that no one is beneath forgiveness and our love. And that seemed, you know, this idea of redemption is almost institutional. It's institutionalized in the Catholic Church. But this idea, we talked about what was personal, this idea of, you know, it's from St. Francis of Assisi, really, this idea that no one is beneath us. There should be no condescension. That everyone is worthy, no matter how disgusting they seem to us on the surface. And that seemed very unhip to me in a good way, that it had no irony, that we weren't laughing at anybody, that to me, the most ethical position I could take was we have to love everybody in the film.
La façon de filmer de James Gray, elle est vraiment, c'est vraiment lui qui m'a donné ce fil, quoi, de choses. Je l'écoute parler parce que c'est vraiment toute cette émotion qu'il mettait dans son histoire, dans sa façon de raconter le film. Moi, il me l'a transmis par des images qu'il m'a envoyées en préparation. Il m'a envoyé des images alors que j'étais en tournage d'un autre film. Et ces images étaient tellement belles, étaient tellement étonnantes, que commençaient à me hanter, presque me troublaient sur l'autre préparation. Et c'est par ces images, et en ajoutant le mot religieux aussi, qui était très important au début dans la préparation, qu'il m'a mis sur la piste de l'ambiance du film, de ce qu'allait être la texture du film, la peau du film, quoi, l'ambiance.
Ellis, when I first went to Ellis Island, which was in 1976, right after they reopened it for tourists, the United States has many wonderful things about it, but it does not respect the idea of history at all. They had basically just closed Ellis Island and put like a lock on the door and walked away. We went with my grandfather, and there were half-filled out immigration forms on the floor. And there was the Ellis Island ferry, which took people from the island to Manhattan, was half sunken in the harbor. It was like haunted. It was the only feeling that it's not the same history, obviously, but the only feeling I can compare it with is when I went to Auschwitz. And my grandfather, he walked in there and he immediately burst into tears. And the woman on the tour with one of the women on the tour with us, my grandfather started speaking to her in Yiddish. And she told the story about she and her sister being separated on the island. So shooting at that place became incredibly important to us. And they made life very difficult. They were not pleased with having us shoot there. But we wound up shooting all of this daytime stuff at night, which was ridiculously complicated and getting 800 extras there or whatever in period garb. It was a not easy thing to deal with logistically. But to know that I was shooting maybe 20, 30 feet from where my grandparents had to walk through, it was amazingly moving. But the best was when we had the Caruso figure sing for them. That was at night.
Yeah, that was very moving, you know.
It was
very
incredible.
beautiful.
We had this guy singing Puccini for Immigrants. I mean, I was recreating an event that actually happened. And I really felt like when we were shooting that with him singing Puccini, I thought this is the reason I always dreamed to make films. That was taken from an opera that I saw, a Puccini operetta called Suor Angelica. And there's only so many times that you can make a film where everyone's walking around with a gun, you know, fuck you, you know, this whole thing. And it was worth it to lose the macho trappings, you know, because it was all an attempt to do what I was just talking about, which is to break down that wall to get to something truly emotional. Yeah, I found her face. I didn't know anything about her when I met her. And I went to dinner with her and with Guillaume Canet. And she liked some actor, and I said, that actor is overrated. And she took a piece of bread and she threw it at me. She told me that I was a jerk. So of course I liked her. I thought her face was great. It was beautiful, but it was very unsentimental. And she had those eyes that were like Falconetti, you know. So that she was French and not Polish, I didn't care. Especially since I was not the one having to learn pages of Polish dialogue. It was a little bit cruel of me because I wrote all this stuff for her in Polish, which she learned brilliantly. And remember, she'd be on set with her little Polish book, and she would be sitting there, and she'd be like this. And then I woke up, are you okay? It's you with this stupid Polish that you gave me so much to learn, and it's pages and pages, and I don't speak Polish, okay? But I'm going to tell you a story about how good she got on it. She had done the scene in Polish with an actress who was Polish. I said to the other actress, I asked the other actress after a take, I said, how is Marion's Polish? She said, it's very good, but it has a slight German accent. So I said to Marion, I said, Marion, you know, your Polish has a slight German accent. She said, well, yes, my character's from Silesia, which is partly German. I said, okay, I'm going to walk behind the camera now and shut up. She was great. She was great, and I'm glad I hadn't seen any of her work because it would have influenced me in how I worked with her. But I had a very blank slate with her and tried to use her face to express things non-verbally. It's a difficult question for me to answer because I'm very, you know, I have no objectivity about him. I'm very close with him, so I can tell you his acting is very different. When I first started working with him, he was brilliant, but he didn't have any craft really. So you would have to do a lot of takes, and one line reading from take 4 would be great, and then the next line, you'd have to use take 6, and the next one, take 9, you'd have to piece it together. And the leap between the yards, or as they say here, the yards, to La Nuit nous appartient. Thank you for laughing. La Nuit nous appartient, that was a very big leap. I don't know what happened to change him. And we used to fight a lot. We used to fight with him all the time. Through day 1 of Two Lovers, we had a big fight the first day of Two Lovers. He called me up that night, he said, I'm quitting. He said, I don't like you. Which is true. I'm pretty dislikable. But he said, that's it, I'm out.
And we talked it through. I said, go ahead and quit. Go ahead and quit then. And then we talked it out that night on the phone, and I kind of never fought with him again. So over the last 2 films, I've had a very agreeable relationship with him, and he and I seem to see the world in a very similar way, which is to say that we're both extremely miserable human beings. So I love him. And the work, I think, has gotten better. I think this performance is very, very risky and extremely bold, and I love what he does, but he's so awful. I mean, up until the last scene, he's lying all the time. So I said, after we finished, I said, what inspired you? And he said, I'm just imitating you, which made me feel great. Well, when I got started, which I hate to say this, is now 20 years ago, I can't believe that, it was very different than it is now. I don't think movies are as important as they were. There's so much more competition now. I mean, video games today and movies, they seem to be meeting somewhere in the middle. I don't know, it's a very different medium. So your question, really I would divide into 2 parts. The first, I would say, is how you get to make films professionally. And the second is what would make you interesting as a filmmaker to me. It's very worthwhile to look at prior history examples. If you look at the great directors of the generation before me, the directors I look up to and love, Francis Ford Coppola, Martin Scorsese, Stanley Kubrick, Robert Altman, so many wonderful American directors from that period. I'm only talking about American directors now. You'll notice that their first great films are almost never their first films. And there is this misconception of genius, which is a very harmful idea. This idea that so-and-so is a genius. It means that they don't have to work for it. It comes out of the sky. I'm born with genius. I'm a genius. I don't believe in genius. I think it's a craft that you work at over and over again. And failure is very, very good for you. There is the example of Picasso, but he's the exception. Look at Cézanne's first great painting. He was probably 50 years old. He was working at it and working at it and working at it. He developed his craft. Edward Hopper's first great painting, he was over 40. So be patient, keep working at it, and try to find a means of expressing what is inside of you emotionally, what is true to you. So don't worry about genius. Worry about expressing yourself. That's all you can do.